Hello, hello, welcome to class. How you doing today? Crystal, I would definitely take the boss up on their offer for sure tomorrow. You want me to take a day off? I'd love to, right? Huh, duh. Hello, Leanne. How are you doing? Good to see you. Do you have your ferret with you today? It's good to see everybody. Looks like we got just a couple of people here today. Oh my goodness, where are all my peeps today? Where are all my peeps? Hopefully somebody will show up. Well, it looks like it's just me, myself, and Irene today, so we'll go ahead. Crystal, Leanne, I hope you're still here with me. Cool. All right. Hello, Karita. Good to see you. The most important two. I think the most important three, I would say. Oh, I'm sorry about that. Well, good. I'm glad you're smiling because you're here in class. Today's lecture won't be too long today. I'm just going to talk a little bit about language. Remember, we do have Wednesday webinar tonight at 8 p.m. Before you come, oh, Cooch. Well, there you go. We've got four. The cat will probably learn more than some of my other students in past semesters have. Ah, Eda's here as well. Hi, Etta. We were just talking about the Wednesday webinar. I put up a review sheet to kind of go along with the video and outline to help you sort of make sense of what was in the video that we're watching today, that we're watching for tonight's video. It's the Baby Human to Think. And it's all about visual recognition, understanding the physics of the world, understanding other people's preferences, and it delves into more deeply the question of when children developed object permanence. I think you'll find the video to be very, very interesting. Good, good, good. I just got it up there today. I'm sorry I drug ass on getting it up, but it is now up and available. Also, Etta, you said you might be interested in the baby human to walk video or to talk video. So I put that in the folder as well. We're going to talk a little bit about language development, but as I said, for the the to think video, you'll get more out of this short lecture I'm going to give today if you'll watch the baby human video that goes along with it. It gives far more detail, provides really detailed and interesting videos demonstrating some of the phenomena that I'm going to talk about. Okay, good, good, good. All right. I'm definitely glad, and I hope you folks like that. And next week, we're going to be talking about socio-emotional development and attachment. So I'm not sure if we're going to go on with the baby human. If after class tonight you folks tell me that you really want to do the third baby human video, I will show it. Otherwise, we might go on to some sort of different lecture style, so webinar style, so that you don't get bored. That's what she said. Oh. Okay, hold on. You know what you need? You need the rim shot. You should have told me, Leanne, Crystal. I'd have been there with the rim shot. How's everybody doing? Looks like we have 9 viewers today. Okay, so a couple of people have joined in. Crystal Eigenreither, are you here as well? Lane Perkinson is here. Good to see you. Check in if you want to say hello. I went to the doctor, and he gave me some morphine. So my throat is feeling much better today, and I'm hoping that I can last several more weeks as long as I've got vitamin M going with me. It's some fabulous stuff. Everything looks wonderful when I take a little dose of that. So I'm feeling much better today than I was on Monday. It's good to see everybody. And by the way, Crystal, thanks for your advice. I've also got some CBD oil, and I'm also going sugar-free for the rest of the treatment because sugar is what cancer likes, and we don't like sugar, right? Absolutely. Oh, by the way, I got some good news from the doctor, too. He said that he can see on the scans that they take every week that the tumor is already starting to shrink. Uh, which it usually doesn't start this early. So he feels very positive about things. So hopefully Dr. Roddenberry will be teaching class for a couple more years anyhow. Yay, right? Okay, so enough about me and enough about sad stuff. Let's talk about the PowerPoint. I know, isn't it? I'm super excited. That's certainly what I wanted to hear. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about language. We're going to talk about why language should be a difficult thing to do. We're going to talk about the fact that humans appear to have a language acquisition device in their brains. We're going to talk about milestones of language during the first 2 years. And then we'll give some strategies for helping your children learn their first language. Okay. Now, it turns out there's a lot of parts to speaking a language. All right. So if you think about it, there are 5 different rule systems that you, as a language speaker, have to learn in order for you to speak a language. The first is the sounds that go into language, or the phonology. You know, there are about 250 different sounds you can make with a pair of lips, a tongue, and a vocal box. So over 200 sounds you can make. Any given language uses a subset of those sounds. So if you speak Polish, you use a few different sounds than we use in English. If any of you speak Arabic or Spanish or Bantu or any other foreign language, or maybe we have some people in here who speak Mandarin Chinese, each and every one of these languages uses a different set of phonemes, which is the basic unit of sound in a language. So you have what's called a bilabial stop, ba 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 ba, or you got a labiodental stop, da 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 da. So I make a B with a bilabial stop. I make a D, da 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 da, with a labiodental stop. And if I give you a fricative, I can make an F. And if I voice that fricative, V, I make a V. So all of these different parts of the language, these phonemes, come from using your vocal box and your lips and your tongue and your teeth in different ways to make these sounds. So you all have to learn the sounds of your language. Then you have to learn the units of meaning that go in the sound, right? So dog is a furry thing that goes bark, bark. Cat is a furry thing that goes meow, meow. Those are both morphemes. You know what? The letter S is a morpheme too, because it carries meaning. If you put S on the end of dog, you know that there's more than one dog. So S is itself a phoneme. ED is a phoneme, right? I walk means I'm walking right now. But if I say I walked and put the ED on the end of it, you know that I'm talking about something that happened a while ago. So you have to learn the sounds of language, and then you have to use these sounds to make the basic units of meaning, the morphemes in these morphemes, the units of meaning with these sounds. Then you have to learn how to put all of these different units of meanings together in such a way that other people can decode what you're saying. And that means the system, and so that means learning grammar. Another way for thinking about syntax is the grammar. Right? Now, once you put all these morphemes together, that leads to the semantics, or the understanding of what I'm trying to say. So if I say walk and ed on the end of it, you know that I put 2 morphemes together to create the past tense of the word walk. If I put s on the end of dogs, you know that I'm not talking about 1 dog, but I'm talking about 2 dogs, and that's the semantics of language. So we have to learn the sounds, we have to learn the units of meaning, we have to learn how to combine these units of meanings into sentences, and then we have to learn how these units of meaning combine themselves to create different kinds of words. So if I say something's discoverable, that's different from saying something's undiscoverable. So we have to put all of these morphemes can actually be multiple syllables. In fact, syllable is itself 1 morpheme. Syllable is a unit of sound in a language. That's a good point. They can be more than 1 syllable, but they can also be one syllable or even one word. That's a great question, Crystal. And if any of you find this stuff interesting, I suggest you take a linguistics class when you get to your four-year school. I took one at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill as a sophomore, and it was one of the coolest classes I had ever taken. And then more importantly, you need to know the pragmatics of language. You need to know how to have a conversation. Anybody ever had a conversation with somebody that doesn't know how to stop and let you talk? You ever been with one of those people that just keeps talking the whole time and they never stop for just a second so that you can add a word in? That person is failing in pragmatics, right? You folks know that if you're talking to a 2-year-old, you have to speak to them differently than you do a 4-year-old, right? When I was 18, they wanted to be an airplane. Ooh, that sounds like a cool job. Of course, you're past the time when you join the military, but I wish you'd taken that up because you would have been cool as an airborne linguist, Crystal. So, we have to relearn all of these steps. In a sense, that's a good question. Davina asks, is that why learning a language is so difficult? Because we basically have to relearn all these steps. In a sense, every language you take, you do have to learn these different steps. So you have to learn the sounds. When I took French, I had to learn the sounds of French. I had to learn the individual units of meaning in French. I had to learn the new French grammar, which was a little bit backwards from the way we do it here in English. And then I had to learn the meanings of words, semantics. Absolutely, Crystal. I mean, Davina. And then I had to learn the pragmatics, when to use the proper vous and not the improper, but the casual to. Yeah. English doesn't have this difference between proper and friendly terms. Sometimes a lot of languages have that. Here in the English language, we don't. So that was another thing I had to learn. Yes, you have to learn all of these things. And more importantly, Davina, you're usually learning your second language outside the time when you are really good at learning languages. So the best time to learn a language is before you're 5 years of age. Most of us sit in college classrooms or in high school classrooms struggling with the language. It's not that we're dumb, it's that we've missed that window when language is really easy to learn. And in fact, if any of you are bilingual yourself and you decide to have a baby, please, please, please teach that baby bilingually from the day they are born. They will thank you for that. They will thank you for that. I like psychology. You will call PSY. You're right. You'll call it psych. Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to do Babel so bad, right? You know, there's what is that one that I use? I'm trying to learn German myself. And what's that language app I use? I forget it. Zingo. What's that language thing I use? Oh, here it is, right here. It is Duolingo. I like Duolingo. Yes, exactly. Duolingo. Duolingo. That's cool. But yes, that's the one I like. And it teaches you all these different parts of the language. So if you've ever talked with a 2-year-old, you notice you can't talk with him like I'm talking to you right now. You have to use small words. You have to talk slowly. You have to repeat yourself. If you've ever been with your 5-year-old in a grocery store, you might have them point at a person and go, "Hey, why does that man have a big birthmark on his face?" And you're totally embarrassed. Or you might say, "Hey, look at that woman. She's really fat." And you'll go, "Shh." Right? That's because your kid doesn't know the pragmatics of language. Sometimes there are things you think, but you don't say, correct? Right. I had Russian, German, and English, but I only speak English. You do understand Russian some? Nice. That's also a very difficult language to learn. You know, the best way to learn a language is to immerse yourself in it. And Crystal, you were talking about the linguistics program for the Air Force. I had a friend that did that, and his name was Paul, and he actually learned Russian. It was a year-long program, and they only let you speak English in the class the first 2 weeks. And then after that, everything was in Russian, whether you knew it or not. And they spent all day long immersing themselves in language. That's why you can sit in the high school classroom and not learn crap for 4 years. You bounce out to a Spanish country and get dropped off on a street corner, you will learn language much, much quicker. I'm sorry. The vocal cords aren't really cooperating with me as well as I want. Whew. Kuchenhausen. Ah. The Kuchenhausen. Excuse me. Ah. I'm sorry, folks. I apologize for that. But, right? Okay. Now, it turns out, well, it doesn't turn out. There's a fellow, remember we talked about core knowledges last class, and I suggested to you that this Elizabeth Spelke suggested that we have core knowledges actually built into our brain, core abilities that just are going to come out if we give them half a chance. Well, the very famous linguist called Noam Chomsky, he did a lot of work back in the 60s and 70s. He's now more of a political writer. He suggested that human beings have this thing called a language acquisition device. He didn't actually mean there's a place in your brain you can point at and say, hey, that's the LAD. But what he was suggesting is that there's an innate biological endowment that enables a child to detect and learn the features and rules of at least one, but maybe more language with relative ease, as long as they are exposed to that language passively during the first years of your life. For those of you who have kids, you didn't actually really try to teach your kid how to speak English or Polish or Bantu or Russian or Spanish. You just talked around them and you talked to them and they automatically picked it up. And that's because we have this language acquisition device, this biological ability that's built into our brain. And in fact, if you remember back to your intro psych class, I suggested to you that there are two parts in your brain that we know are specifically related to different linguistic abilities. Your ability to move your lips and form words is controlled by Broca's area in your frontal lobe. If you have damage to Broca's area, you'll be able to understand language, but you'll find it very difficult to speak. You'll have trouble getting the words out. So your vocalizations, your ability to produce language is in Broca's area. If you have damage to that, you will be given the diagnosis of non-productive aphasia. Non-productive. You can't produce. That's the problem. Aphasia is a speech disorder. Non-productive means you have trouble getting the words out. Broca discovered this because he studied a patient he nicknamed Tan, because that was the only word that Tan could say. And when Tan died, Paul Broca, the French doctor, did an autopsy and found that he had a damaged spot right in here in his frontal lobe. And so he diagnosed, he was the first to identify Broca's area. Now, back behind that in the temporal lobe is an area that was discovered by Carl Wernicke in sort of the same fashion. And Carl Wernicke found this to be sort of the grammar center of your brain. The grammar center of your brain. Now, people with damage to Wernicke's area can say words all day long, but their words don't make any sense together. They don't have the ability to put words together grammatically. And these people also have trouble if you ask them questions. They can't understand the grammar. They can't decode the grammar of the language to even answer your questions. If infant only watched TV in a certain language, would they also pick up that language? No. It turns out that language requires more than just watching a TV. It requires social interaction. And also, if you watch the video on To Talk, what you're going to find is that children engage in this, have this ability we call fast mapping. They learn 12 words a day through the first 5 years of their life. You don't think it, but if you compare it, if you count a kid's vocabulary at 5 years of age and then divide it by the number of days that they've been alive, you'll find that children learn on average 11 to 12 words a day. But they only learn those words if they hear the parent say it, and also if they see the parent looking at it at the same time. So if you name something without looking at it or showing it to your kid, they won't be able to fast map that term. That's a really good question, Davina. You actually need social interaction, and you need the parent to look at the object and name it at the same time. Wernicke's encephalopathy, pickling of your brain from alcohol. Wow, I haven't heard of Wernicke's encephalopathy. I will definitely look that up. That's interesting. Would people with a language disability be able to write and complete sentences? Actually, they would. That's the bizarre thing. That's one of the things that's absolutely bizarro and amazing about the brain. So we talked about the fusiform gyrus, which is responsible for helping you recognize people visually. If you have damage to the fusiform gyrus on the inside part of the temporal lobe, you will not be able to recognize your parents if you see them. No matter how long you live, you'll never be able to recognize your parents. However, if your parents call you on the phone and you hear it acoustically, you'll be able to recognize them by their voices. That's sort of one of the really weird thing about this modularity idea of the brain. So the person can probably write and read the language, but they won't be able to listen to it acoustically and decode it. Broca's aphasia. Oh, really? Is Broca's aphasia caused by drinking too much alcohol? I hadn't heard that, Crystal. That's an interesting idea. Wow. The students are teaching the teacher. Now, the neat thing, so this guy, Noam Chomsky, a linguist, came up with this idea called the language acquisition device. Now, his dissertation actually brought down sort of the career ambitions of a fellow named, oh my goodness, B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner wrote a book called Verbal Behavior back in the 1950s, in 1957 actually. And it was B.F. Skinner's idea that B.F. Skinner, I don't know if you folks remember him from Psych 150, was a behaviorist, and he thought everything was learned by the environment. In fact, he was what they call a radical behaviorist. He said everything, good, bad, smart, dumb, is learned through, in exactly the Skinner box, is learned through environment and rewards. And he argued that people learn a language through behaviorist principles. So your kid says dog, you pat them on the head and they learn the word dog. Your kid says food, you feed them, they learn the word food that way. And it was the belief in the 1950s that we learn language by the environment. But you know what? Noam Chomsky, and I forget the name of the book. I can't do that. I can't Google on that. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Noam Chomsky language book. What was the name of that book? I'm going to Google. Syntactic Structures is the name of his book. And he wrote this book where he basically defeated every argument that B.F. Skinner had that language was learned by the environment. Now, it turns out that parents reinforce the meaning, not the rules of language. So you can say something ungrammatically and your parents will still smile at you because they know what you're trying to say. And yet somehow, with no reinforcement whatsoever, you seem to learn the grammar and syntax of a language, even though in your parents' mind, that's the secondary thing. Okay? Now, novel sentence formation. Here's the thing. The sentences that I'm speaking to you right now, I never heard. Now, in the behaviorist tradition, every sentence you say had to have been taught to you through reinforcement and punishment. Somebody had to hear me say this behavior and pat me on the head and say, Chris, that's the exact right way to say that sentence. But that doesn't happen. People say novel sentences all the time without reinforcement. So people can say things that they've never been taught. That doesn't work with a behaviorist point of view. All right. And here's the thing. If language is so environmental, how come language milestones are the same or similar all over the world? Surely in Africa, they may teach language differently than they do here in the United States. In Poland, they may teach a language different than they do here in the United States. And yet, all over the world, children still hit the same language milestones at about the same time. That means it can't be all about the environment. And most importantly, there's a critical period for normal language development. Yes, you can learn a second language after you're 5 years old, but only if you learned the first language if you were before 5 years old. It turns out that this natural endowment called a language acquisition device is subject to a critical period. If you aren't exposed to language in the first couple of years of your life, you will never learn how to speak a mature language using all the grammatical and syntactic structures that you're supposed to use. If anybody wants evidence of this, I would direct you to the video about Jeannie Wilder, the original Wild Child. She was the girl that was raised in isolation in LA until she was 11 years old by her abusive father. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody was allowed to speak to her. She was tied to a potty chair in a room, and they would feed her by slipping food underneath the door. And her abusive dad wouldn't let anybody talk to her till she was 11 years old. Now, when they found her, developmental psychologists and other people tried to teach her a second language, but she never learned how to speak a second language. In fact, I would say she showed the linguistic expertise that a well-trained ape can. So apes can't really learn a mature language either, and Jeannie Wilder was not able to learn a language. Yes, I can definitely post you a video about that. YouTube, let me see, I can even find it right now. Let's see, come on, boot up YouTube. Jeannie Wiley, not Wilder, Wiley. Excuse me. Boom, right here. Oh, this is only the 12-minute. You know what? This is the 12-minute. Maybe, do you want the full one? The Feral Child. Let's see. I can find it. I can find it. I swear to God, I can find it right here. There we go. TLC documentary. Actually, this one's going to have, it's going to tell you about some other. Oh, jeez. Come on, Chris. Figure it out. I'm trying to type in front of a crowd and I can't do it. Okay, there we go. And it is now in the chat bar for you, Davina. Boom, there you go. This includes a couple of short clips about other people, including the girl that was raised in Russia. Her parents were bad alcoholics. At the age of 2, she crawled outside the house on a cold Siberian night and climbed into the dog cage and was basically raised by dogs for the next 7 years of her life because her parents were too drunk to care about her. So it's going to include clips about her as well as the Jeannie story. I hope you enjoy that video. Now, let's talk a little bit about language development. Language development is a social process learned within a specific context that involves joint attention. Joint attention is when both of us look at the same object. Davina, you asked the question, can you learn language from the TV? No, because there is no joint attention. You and the TV don't look at the same objects together. You don't interact together. It's all about that social interaction and the kid following your eyes to see what you are looking at. You know what? I've got a great video too. Oh my goodness, what's that fellow's name? Language TED Talk. Oh, language is a social thing. What in the heck is that fellow's name? TED Talk. 2 years. 2 years. Come on, give me that language TED Talk. Crapadola. I forget his name. Crap. Video cameras. cameras. Dev, I think his name was Dev. But yeah, language is a social process. You learn about water in the kitchen when you're asking your parents for water and they're giving you water. You learn about play when you're in the living room playing with your parents. So language is context dependent. And so your joint attention abilities at 12 and 18 months predict your language skills at 24 months. So if you're good at following your parents' eyes, you're going to have better language at 24 months of age. Now, let me go through the typical language milestones. The first thing you're going to do is cry at birth. Crying is a form of communication. Any of you have ever cried in front of a romantic partner? You're trying to tell them that you're hurt and you need attention. Crying we do even as adults, and crying has a communicative value, right? When you cry, you're trying to tell somebody. So that's the first communication we do at birth. And then after that, your kid's going to start making vocalization, but they're not very good at making vocalizations, so they're going to engage in cooing. And cooing is just like moving the vocal cords and getting everything going, but you're not actually forming words. Now, kids at about the age of 4 or 5 months are going to be able to understand the first word. And here's the deal. There's a difference between what we would call receptive language and productive language. Productive language is being able to talk. Receptive language is being able to understand. You folks both have productive and receptive language. But I will tell you, in language development, receptive language precedes productive language. You are able to understand language long before you can actually speak it. So around 4 or 5 months, your kid's going to be able to understand what you're saying to them, right? And that's going to help them to understand the world and to begin speaking, right? Now, at about the age of 6 months of age, at the age of 6 months, your kid is going to be learning how to babble. And now their vocalizations are getting a little more organized, and they're closing those lips together, and they're stopping the sound, ba ba ba, da da da, da da da. In my opinion, what your kid is doing is they are practicing their phonemes at this point. They are practicing their phonemes. Excuse me. All right, and that happens around 6 months. Now, it turns out sometime between the age of 6 to 12 months, your child goes from being a universal language to being a language-specific listener. What does that mean, Chris? Well, that means before the age of 6 months, your kid can hear every phoneme and every phonemic difference that people make. So your kid can hear the difference between ba and da, la and ra. But starting at around 7 or 8 months, and I've got a TED Talk about this if anybody's interested, your children go from a universal linguist where they can hear all sound differences to becoming a specialized linguist where they can only hear the sound changes in their language. Sometimes here in America, we talk about, and some people will even laugh, that people from Asian cultures sometimes mix their L's and their R's up. I don't know if you've ever heard that, the L and the R mix up that you might hear from some Asian speakers. And that's because in the Asian language, they don't use the L-R distinction. And so little Chinese babies at around 7 or 8 months become blind or deaf to the la-ra phoneme change. And it's got a really cool video. Heather, you said your child was autistic, right? Didn't you say your child was diagnosed as autism? I wonder if the language difficulties was because of these social problems as opposed to. Is your child verbal now? Yes, they would, Davina. That's a good question. And that's why if you want to teach your kid to speak like a native, you need to expose them to all the languages you want them to learn as a baby. Do not shy away from teaching your kids 2 languages at one time. Now, it turns out they're going to be a little bit confused for a while, and they may hit their language milestones a little bit slower, but they will eventually catch up, and you will have yourself a bilingual child. My laptop just died. I should have changed the power cord when it asked me to, so that's why I ducked down. Now, your kid from 8 to 12 months is going to start using gestures such as showing and pointing. If you think about it, that's not verbal, but they do. That is a form of language. If I'm pointing at that bottle of water or that cookie, that means I want that. So that is sort of a way of communicating. Not verbal, but it is a way of communicating. Yes, you definitely need to tell your Polish friends that. Don't shy away from teaching their kids that second language. It is very, very important. You started speech therapy at 2.5 years old. Good deal. Fantastic. Some kids with more severe forms of autism are nonverbal. And when I used to coach baseball out at the Miracle League with my Miracle League kids, we had a lot of kids with autism. Some of them were verbal, some of them were not verbal. And so they often, they would tell us which ones were going to have trouble with language and which ones weren't. I spent about 6 years coaching the Miracle League. I didn't coach last year because of COVID, and this year I'm not coaching because I'm a little bit sick. But if any of you want something to do on Saturdays, go down to the Miracle League and coach those kids with developmental problems. It is the most fun you will ever have. Some have to use pictures to communicate. Yeah, and it just depends on your ability to produce these sort of language. You know what? I've coached a lot of baseball from coach. I've coached in college. I've coached in high school. I've coached travel leagues. And the nicest parents I ever met were the Miracle League kids. It was the most fun I ever had. I got cussed out by all the other parents. But these parents actually understood what we as coaches were trying to do. So I love the Miracle League. And when I get better, I plan on going back out there. Now, your kid's going to say their first word around 11 to 12, 12, maybe even 13 months. If it's a Roddenberry, Roddenberries are some chatterbox, mouthy people. It's in my genes. So my kid said his first word at 10 months. Your kid might take 14 months to say their first word. Don't get hung up on that. It's going to happen somewhere around the first year. Now, if you're like me, most parents, as soon as your kids start learning word at 12 months, they're going to start saying different words. And you and your partner are going to get there tonight every night after the kid goes to bed, and you're gleefully going to count how many words that your kid can say. Our kid can say 6 words. Our kids can say 7 words. Our kids can say 12 words. And you're going to be so excited. But then you know what? One day around 18 months, your child's going to experience what's called a vocabulary spurt. And all of a sudden, they're just going to, out of nowhere, they're going to start saying hundreds of words. And it's going to shock you. You're going to say, wow, my kid knew 6 words the other day, and now they know 180 words. That's because sometime during the second half of the second year, your child's going to go through what we call a vocabulary spurt. And at that point, they're actually, for the first time, going to make their first sentence. A first sentence is going to be a 2-word utterance. We call it a telegraphic speech. Not going to be grammatical, but they're going to say, want water, want milk, mommy doggy, or doggy scary. These are not real sentences, but it's 2 words put together to convey some sort of desire or some sort of meaning. And so you're going to see after the vocabulary spurt starts, you're going to see them starting to use sentences, albeit very, very simplistic ones. And if you look right underneath me, what you're seeing right here is the range for the first word and for the vocabulary spurt. It doesn't happen on a given day. It happens between a range of times. So the first word may come as early as 10 months. Your child may be 18 months before they say their first word. Your kid's vocabulary spurt may start at 13 months. It may not start until after the second year. So don't get hung up. Just keep talking to your kid. Keep pointing at things, and they'll figure it out. I promise, because they have a language acquisition device in their brain. Final thing, Okay, how can you, because all parents want to know, how can I help my kids learn a language? How can I help them teach? Okay, so here are some, again, your kid's going to learn it. Don't worry about it. But if you want some things to sort of help your child along, here's what we know. We know that socioeconomic status is related to language proficiency. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's wealthier people have more time to spend on language development with their kids. Maybe when you're not struggling to make ends meet, you have more time to interact with your kids. But economic status is related to language proficiency. And it just seems to be related to the amount and quality of talk that parents direct at their children. Talk to your kids, talk to your kids, talk to them about everything you're doing, and use lots and lots of words. Use that big vocabulary. It's not just the number of words, but the diversity of vocabulary. Um, you know what? Everybody's different, Etta. Some people grow tall, some people grow short. Some people like broccoli, some people don't. Um, just keep talking to your kids, and it'll help them reach it at whatever the early point is for them. But there's going to be definite variability in difference. In fact, it turns out that as a general rule, there's it's gender related too. Little girls seem to speak earlier than little boys. They're able to communicate, and in fact, this is probably why some if 5-year-old boys don't do as well in kindergarten as 5-year-old girls do. Sometimes it's better, especially if you have a boy, don't rush him into school. Especially don't be one of those parents that puts your 4.5-year-old in kindergarten. They're probably not ready for it. But little girls seem to have better verbal skills than boys. Actually, it turns out, and I know why, females process some of their language on the right side too. Females tend to have more area dedicated to language than do males. I guess we use that extra space for rock throwing. I'm not sure. Okay, now, child-directed speech. The weird thing is, and when I find this video by this guy, it turns out that when your kids are trying to learn something, a lot of times without even knowing it, you will simplify your sentences that you say in order to help a kid learn a specific word or phrase that you're trying to teach them. And this is called child-directed speech. And so what you'll do is you'll say in a higher pitch than normal. You'll say simple words and sentences. See the doggy? See the doggy? Nice doggy. See how I raised my voice and I used very, very simple telegraphic speeches? That's sort of what we do without even thinking about it. We use this child-directed speech. Now, what are some caregiver strategies? Whenever your kid says something, say it back to them, maybe adding some words or making it proper. So when your kid says, see the doggy, you say, yes, I see the doggy. It's a nice doggy. And the kid says, more milk. You want some more milk? Recast what your kid says. And that sort of helps them evolve their grammatical ability. Now, if your kid says something, talk about it. Expand on the topic. If your kid says doggy, talk about that doggy. Tell them everything you can about that doggy. And be sure to carry them around and label everything you're doing. See the spoon? I'm here cooking hamburgers. See how we put the hamburger? And just label everything you possibly can. The more you talk to your kid, the better they're going to learn the language. You don't need to make it like an English class or a French class or a foreign language class. You don't need to make it academic. Talk to them, talk to them, talk to them. Repeat back to them what they say to you. Expand their sentences and make them bigger sentences, and label everything you possibly can. And that's going to help your child's language development. And you know what? Carry your 6-month around with you. Maybe they're not talking yet, but just tell them what you're doing, man. Narrate your activities. See, I'm cooking hamburger for dinner. We're going to put the hamburgers in here, and then we're going to put cheese on them. And you love cheeseburgers, don't you? Blah, blah, blah. Exactly. It does make motherese, they used to call it. A better term is child-directed speech because daddies do it too. Talk a little bit slower, but narrate your activities. Make them an active participant in your day and talk to them. I know the TV is a great babysitter, but try to get them out in front of that TV and talk to them while you're doing stuff. Point and look at things. Remember, joint attention. Point and look at things you're talking about. Speak in simple terms, and don't be afraid to repeat yourself. And you know what? Games keep kids engaged. Anytime you're playing a game, peekaboo or find the doggy or whatever, that is useful. It engages learners. It engages you as college students. Play games with your kids. And you know what? Listen to your kids. Listen to your kids. And be an interactive partner with them. Okay, things you'll see in children who are learning grammar. Sometimes kids will apply a word to objects that are inappropriate for the word's meaning, like calling cats dogs, or sometimes they will over-regularize. They'll talk about words that are inappropriate for words' meaning. So they might call everything a dog or everything a horse. That's just a typical thing that shows that the kid doesn't exactly know all the details yet. Sometimes they'll under-apply a word, so they won't know that that's a doggy too. So they use overextension and underextension, and this is because they're trying to figure out where the beginning and ending of labels start. They don't know what is a dog and what's not a dog. They have to learn the critical features, and sometimes they'll overextend or underextend word meanings. And sometimes kids will over-regularize verbs, which is a great key showing you that kids learn grammar without you even telling them. So instead of saying, I went to the store, the kid might say, I goed to the store. That shows that your kid is using language syntax abilities. Even though they made a mistake, it shows that they sometimes understand the grammar and syntax of a language even before you teach them. And as I mentioned earlier, telegraphic speech are just those two-word sentences that don't have proper grammar that convey a sense of meaning. Mommy scared, doggy mean, more cookies, right? That's not a real sentence, but it does convey some meaning. All right? So, and if I show you the video, don't worry about statistical learning because I don't have the video to show you. But remember, I told you that critical periods are periods in your developing brain's life when it has to be exposed to something in order for the brain to develop normally. There's a critical period for attachment. There's a critical period for vision, for goodness sakes. There's a critical period for language. There are lots of critical periods, and these are times when brains need to be exposed to something in order for that ability to develop normally. And there is a critical period for language, as I mentioned today. Okay, that's all I had to say. I thought I was going to get out of here early, but I guess I did not. You know what? Teachers know how to talk, and I'm a Roddenberry teacher. I can talk for hours and hours and hours and days sometimes, right? But that's all I have to say to you folks. I hope you're going to join me for webinar tonight. I really, really, really hope you watch that video, The Baby Human to Think. Since I lied to you about the pop quiz last week, I can't lie to you and tell you that I'm going to give you a pop quiz this week. You probably won't believe it. But I still want you to watch that video for me before tonight. Cool. Well, I'm a simple kind of person, Heather, so I have to simplify things. Okay, cool. All right, folks, if you don't have any questions for me, I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast. If you do have questions, feel free to send me a remind text. You and Cooch, Cooch and Crystal, y'all have a good day. And Cooch is welcome to come to class tonight. And he or she does not even have to watch the video. They're welcome without watching it. Stephanie, good to see you. You folks have a great day, and I will see you tonight at 8 o'clock.